Hey, it's me, your boy Blue Gansiga, and today I'll be doing a Yu-Gi-Oh! Tier analysis on Windwitch and Evil Twins. Windwitch are an Arc 5 archetype, they're synchro based, and they're basically made up of wind spellcaster monsters. And this deck actually works well with a lot of other wind synchro monsters. For the pros, we have Master Roll 5, because now you can actually summon multiple synchros and even fusions onto the field, so Windwitch can actually get a lot out of their buck. next, next they have good monsters in general. I think, yeah, pretty much all their monsters are really good. Hell, actually, all their cards so far are really good. None of their cards have been misses. They have I think they have what, 8 cards in general, or even 9, and they're really good. The only problem with this deck is they just lack more cards. This deck is fairly consistent because you have a lot of searchers and things that special summon from deck and do things and net you advantage. This deck has decent protection in the form of your level 1 tuner, which name I forgot, as well as your freeze bell. Because if you actually use both of them to synchro summon your boss monster, that's this thing, that's like a 2800 boss monster that can pop things during either player's turn, twice per turn, that is protected from battle and from card destruction. This deck can chip away at your opponent's life points with these, especially if you do the combo right. You can easily burn your opponent for 2,500 on your first turn, and you can potentially burn them for even more. So technically you put your opponent on a clock easily. Or if your opponent's actually if your opponent's life points are untouchable by battle, you can actually just burn them for game with this. Like I did this one time where my opponent had a big boss monster, but they had little life points left. So all I did was just burn them for game. This deck can swarm with ease because a lot of the Wind Witches are really good. Yeah, they're just really good. A lot of them have special summon effects. I think all of them special summon themselves, with the exception of the level 4 tuner and the level 5 tuner. Also, the weird thing about this deck is this deck has more tuners in the main deck than non-tuners in the main deck. But that's neither here or there. For the cons, this deck needs more Wind Witch monsters. That's about it. They need more Wind Witch monsters to actually, function better. This deck, in a way, reminds me of Battle Wasps. It reminds me of Battle Wasp in the sense that most of their cards are pretty good. They just need more cards to actually work with. And this card can't and this deck cannot play through multiple disruptions. For power, I give this deck a 3 out of 5 because yes, this thing is pretty powerful and it could just pop things and it has good attack, but it's just not that powerful, and you shouldn't expect to OTK all that often in this deck. For defense, I give this deck a 3 out of 5 because this deck can easily protect you from battle and card destruction. And like I mentioned, this deck is fair. And what makes this different from Arm Drain is Arm Drain has similar things, but in Windwitch is a lot more practical and a lot more consistent to actually get off than in Arm Dragons. And for recovery, I give this deck a 3.5 out of 5. I forgot to put the out of 5 part. I give it a 3.5 out of 5 because this deck, it could easily top deck and just net you advantage because you get your Ice Bell, you special summon from deck, you get your level 4, the level 4 searches, and you can add Freeze Bell, or you can add the level 1 tuner, and you can basically go off from there. So there's a lot of comeback ability, especially if you have your spell card in your hand, like the Chime card. That's really good. As far as versatility, I give this deck a 2.5 out of 5. Because what this deck likes doing, or at least what this deck can do, is pop cards. You can somewhat float. You can go into multiple synchro monsters, including your Clear Wing or Crystal Wing. Or you can actually, burn your opponent, which is why I'd say that this deck is fairly versatile, but it's not that versatile. So I guess you could say that this deck is a 3 out of 5 instead of a 2.5 out of 5. And for consistency, I'd give this deck 3 out of 5 since this deck is pretty consistent and they could easily achieve their win condition. Which sounds a little bit contradictory considering I mentioned that one of this deck's biggest problems is they don't have that many monsters to work with. Anyways, I'd give this deck a tier. I would label this deck tier 3. It has the potential to be tier 2.5 or tier 2 itself. But like I mentioned, they are lacking cards. They have like about 9 cards to their name, if I can remember correctly. Let me count. Yeah, this deck has 9 cards to its name. All of which are good, by the way, but it's still not enough. Next, we have Evil Twins. Evil Twins, they're a fairly new archetype. They came out in the same set or same pack as Drytrons and Magistus. And Evil Twins, they like to focus on their 2 Link monsters that special summon themselves. Special summon each other. Anyways, let's get started. For the pros, they have good boss monsters. This card especially, it's not all that great to run at 3 because it can brick, but it's still a very good card in the deck. This deck is consistent because you have a lot of ways to search out your main deck monsters, and it makes it very easy to actually summon multiple of them out onto the field. So that way you can actually summon your boss monsters a lot faster. This deck is fairly versatile in some of the things it can do. Not inherently, because inherently speaking, like just pure, like considering nothing else, this deck isn't all that versatile, but because of the way this deck plays, you can run tons of traps that do different things, and you could actually trip up your opponent like that, which is why I say that this deck is fairly versatile. Like, you could still be playing pure Evil Twin, but you can just toss in whatever traps you want and trip up your opponent. Now, oh yeah, also they can set up several disruptions because this deck can snowball advantage, so it's pretty good. Like, you can easily get out like your Lilla and you could get out your Kiss a Kill and Lilla out onto the field. The Link monsters fairly easily, and I think one of them, I forgot which one. I think Lilla lets you draw a card, so you can technically draw more cards, especially going first, and just set a bunch of traps for your opponent. And for the cons, this deck is generally good going first. Going second, it's pretty meh. It's not absolutely terrible, but you'd prefer not to most of the time. Usually you can't play through more than one disruption, and sometimes struggle to get over big protected monsters because one of your main forms of monster removal, besides the main deck traps, are one of your link monsters, because when it's special summon it pops, I think, a face up card. It's either a card or a face up card. And a lot of cards in the game now have protection, like the big boss monsters, they have negations or some built-in form of protection. So sometimes you're going to have to really work to get rid of their monster. So that kind of sucks. Anyways, for power, I'd give this deck a 2 out of 5. Like, I would give it a 1.5 out of 5 if it weren't for the fact that this card exists. And for defense, I give this deck a 3.5 out of 5 because this deck can actually, this deck can actually prevent OTKs fairly well. And they have quite a bit of defensive cards to work with. For recovery, I'd give this deck a 4 out of 5 because you can easily get back into the duel with things like War Legacy Succession or Pot of Avarice, since you do tend to fill up your graveyard with monsters fairly easily. This deck is fairly versatile, so I'd give it a 3.5 out of 5. And for consistency, I give this deck a 4 out of 5 since this deck has a lot of search power. And I guess one of the things I should say is this deck, they have good spells and traps. The spells and traps are pretty decent with the exception of their field spell, and even then, the field spell isn't too bad. Anyways, overall, I'd say that this deck is a tier 2.5 deck. Tell me what you guys think about Evil Twins, and tell me if you think I'm wrong to actually say that this deck is a tier 2.5. Anyways, it's me, your boy Blue Gatcha Guy, and I'm out.